Hello, folks. Hope you're doing well. This is Michael with the Reason RX podcast. Hope you're enjoying the episodes, and hopefully, if you'd please pass it around to friends, people you know who are parents, people in education, teachers, school administrators, others involved. This podcast and other podcasts would help them do better in education, make our culture better for you, better for us, better for the culture, better for our students and children. And if you could leave some good ratings, some good reviews, we'd appreciate it. And if you could, for those who can, if you could donate Patreon or PayPal, one-time donation, monthly small donation of even $5 would help. Then we could do more to build and promote the program, get better sound equipment, of course. Maybe have some shirts and everything that go with the podcast. There, Melanie's calling. That's why it's loud. But okay, let me get started here. Okay, folks. So today we're here. We're going to talk to Sabrina Bell, a mover, an expert with children. She said some good experience that'll be informative on the show. You know, we've talked a number of times about how movement is important for human development and growth and learning. It's in a number of our podcasts, as for example, the one with Janet Oliver, the neurodevelopment specialist. Movement's not optional. You can also read the book Spark by Dr. John Rady, a really good book presenting a lot of evidence for the need for children to move and be able to learn, remember, process, think better, be more productive and creative. Because we got to consider, as we always talk about, to repeat for the millionth time, we're holistic. We're not brains in a vat or computers or rational rocks or something like that. We're human beings. We have all these different aspects, emotion, reason, physical body, and it's all integrated. Other aspects as well, social. But one thing that is underplayed in our culture, I think, is the fitness movement aspect. And so it's important to drill into that more and really develop it. Besides, it's fun. It's like physical fitness is fun. Getting out, doing things, if you know what movement really is and aren't caught up in like the gym mentality. Not to knock gyms. I mean, gyms have some good things about them, but I think they turn some people off, and that turns them away from movement. And then we got to think about how, as I heard Dr. John Rady say today in a podcast on Earthrise, I think it is. Not Earthwise, but Earthrise with an R. I think it was episode 64 or something like that. He said something that made me think about things some other people have said and made me look at it in a different way and take it more seriously. He was talking about the fact that we should we should do things like for a purpose. And I think one reason why some people don't move today is because they don't have a reason to. And that's kind of the thing that got me thinking about it more. All animals and humans, almost all through history, have always had a reason to move. And that's one thing that's wrong with our culture. It's great that we've got all these comforts and luxuries and stuff, but things need to be redesigned so it doesn't take away this essential, important need to move. Putting a purpose for movement in our lives. It should be all unified. We got to get that back. But so that's something to think about going into this and thinking about other episodes we talked about. It's supposed to be some really good conversation because we got to talk to Sabrina before. But anything to add, Melanie?
No, I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to help us out with some kid issues with movement. I mean, we always talk to the adults, but definitely children need to be brought into that picture. And it sounds like, from what we know about Sabrina and her experience, it's going to be very educational, interesting to hear what her take on all of that is. So looking forward to that.
So cool. Because she's worked with some younger kids. So
right.
Melanie's not calling Sabrina a kid.
Oh,
we've talked to adults. We want to see what children think.
No, I think when we think about movement, we're thinking mostly how do we get adults to move and stuff. But I think it starts when they're younger. So, and Sabrina's definitely had experience with that. So cool.
It's called a joke, Melanie.
Well.
But okay, so let's bring in Sabrina and have her tell us about herself.
All right. Well, hello. It did sound a little bit like you were calling me a kid. I did hear that. But I feel like by the end of the statement, I felt like I was an adult at the end. But yes, I'm Sabrina. I have had a lot of work with kids in the past. Since I was a little kid, actually, I've done a lot of work with them. So I started out working with kids when I was a bit younger. And then as I've progressed through life, I discovered how much I love to move. So I sort of put those two worlds together. I just recently finished up massage therapy school. So I do a lot of different things. All of my things have a theme. A lot of it has to do with education and movement and just sort of a holistic health overall. But definitely I do a variety of, I have many jobs, to put it that way. I teach yoga. I teach sort of natural and functional movement. I've done the MoveNet certifications, a few of them. I've done restorative exercise through Katy Bowman's Nutritious Movement. And then I work at this really awesome nature center school and after school program. So I've worked at a few different nature schools, and it's definitely been really nice to work with kids in a setting outside of the strict public school settings, where there are very many things you are not allowed to do, a lot of it because you're confined to a building. We do have a building at this facility too, but I'm also at an after-school program for the older kids, the K through 5, and then I'm with preschoolers during the day. And so there are different rules and regulations, or just different things that we're trying to accomplish with the preschoolers. So there's definitely more freedom for things like movement and, honestly, freedom of expression in many ways.
Yeah. That's one way people control other people, by not letting them move, and then you can't express yourself.
Right.
Solitary confinement, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because pretty much any form of expression takes some kind of movement.
It does. You definitely see kids express themselves both physically and verbally differently when we're running around outside versus inside. Because even though it is an outdoor program, obviously there is time spent indoors. I have worked at a facility where everything was outside when I was in Oregon for a little bit, but for the most part, we try and get them outside as much as possible, but we have to do about 30 minutes of homework for these older kids every day, and so you just got to get that done so we can go have what I consider to be the real fun.
Before we get into more of that, let's tell folks a little more about your background. So, restorative exercise with Katy Bowman. We'll be having a podcast coming out talking to Danny Hammett. And she's worked with Katy a long time, worked on Katy's podcast with her, and did her training also. That'll be coming out for folks. But can you tell us about the restorative exercise program? What was that about? What'd you learn? How'd you like it?
Yes. So I stumbled upon Katy's podcast, which is, I think, how I found a lot of her work. I started reading her stuff and it really clicked with me. I think before any of the micro movements of it, the alignment of it, because a lot of it is how we line our bodies up. And for instance, when you line your car tires up, if they're in good alignment, they last a lot longer, right? This is sort of a way she describes it a lot of the times. But if they're out of alignment, the car's going to break down faster than it has to be. And the human body is the same way. If we're out of alignment, maybe one foot is turned out to the right more and your left foot is turning in a little bit. That's really kind of a wacky alignment for your body to move through life. And that means that every time you're walking, you're using muscles that maybe aren't as ideal. And you walk and you move all day long. So just a lot of compensations happen throughout your entire life. But honestly, even before that, what drew me to the work was in her book, Move Your DNA, she talks about that essentially we're all zoo animals. And this idea, and I think other authors have talked about this too, but this idea that, you know, we're living a life very confined in the same way that zoo animals are, and their health and their happiness and many factors about them are very, very different. You know, so she talks about this orca living in captivity, and when it swims in one direction all the time, it gets this fin that flops over to one side. But that really never happens in the wild because it has the chance to swim up and down and left and right. And we're sort of like those zoo animals in the way that our bodies are being used, which is very repetitively. Because, you know, walking is a wonderful movement, but if you're walking on flat pavement that has really level and even surfaces, you're only moving parts of your body rather than moving many parts of your body that can move. You know, if you're on rocks or you're barefoot, or if you're on sand, it's different than if you're on grass. You know, everything has a different factors, and we just don't necessarily think about that. So that definitely piqued my interest in this idea of, you know, just moving in a really different manner. And I was nannying for this family who had maybe a 4-month-old at the time, and it was super great because I was able to implement a lot of these pieces of advice that Katy had while I was nannying. So I was always pretty big on holding the children while I was babysitting because my family had always been pretty big on hands-on. I don't really remember them using strollers a whole ton with us. But so I did a lot with holding her and facilitating her movement, and same with her older brother. And just, I really used these kids. It was actually a really great way to learn a lot of new things about this movement because, you know, it's different when you have a whole class of children because there are many things that are harder and many things that are easier, but I was definitely able to try a lot of little things like maybe this baby is actually strong enough to hold herself up on my arms. I'm not going to just let go and see if she falls, but just through the course of a couple of days or weeks, you know, see, can she develop her own strength? And then therefore, it also creates a lot of confidence, right? When children have these strengths, like her older brother, you know, he had a lot of weaknesses. He was born very prematurely, and he had a lot of occupational therapy and physical therapy as a young child. And as he did a lot of movement with me, I could just see his confidence rise. Like he took this lifeguarding course last summer, and he came back from this 3-week course. He could swim so far out, and he got really muscular. Actually, it's really funny. He's almost 12 now, and I've never seen him be more confident. Oh, he just radiated, and he's like, look, I can do push-ups. And this is a kid who I would never have expected to come up to me and say, look, I can do push-ups, you know? And I'm not going to say push-ups are sort of the ultimate movement to strive for, but he was so excited, and I was really excited for him that he just felt so good about himself because he was strong and competent. Or felt that he always was, but he just, I think, needed a lot of the physical strength to feel it emotionally.
That's a great age for young boys and girls to start getting that confidence factor. And all uphill from there. You know, those first few years of puberty are just tough anyway. So to have it ready is a great start for sure.
And so, on this restorative exercise thing, so folks know
I
more.
I segued a little. Sorry.
Pardon?
I said I segued a little from the restorative exercise.
Some good anecdotes and stories in there, analogies about some of the things that people can understand. And maybe I'll see if I can find out something more about the orca thing. So if people can't get a good enough description from what you said, they can dig into it more, look a little on their own. The car alignment thing I liked a lot. And then the zoo animal might seem a little off-putting to some people. Like, what do you mean? I'm not in a zoo. I'm fine.
Yes.
But that just takes more broad context of looking at movement and study. So if people just do a little more research, because it matters. It will benefit you so much if you go into it with an inquisitive, curious mind. It'll help you, help friends, family, your kids and students. And if you want to use some other term, then fine, you know, but the basic idea is that we're kind of confined and limited by the culture we're put in. Because
right.
if we think about it, not every piece of furniture was designed thinking about, when some people designed furniture 500 years ago, they didn't sit down and think about, what are human biomechanics and what's the evolutionary history of the human being that I need to consider in designing this chair so it fits most fully into a human life. Said
right.
No one designing a chair 500 years ago ever, so we got the stuff that's like technology is like embodied thought, so to speak. And if
right.
the thought is not sufficiently developed, well, then it's like technology that's not going to be sufficiently developed to fit the needs and fulfill the full human potential of our lives and everything. And so with some of the stuff, it's like that. And sometimes we got to learn to be in AC a little bit, but then get out in the heat or be willing to get out in the cold. So
right.
you can deal with those things. And so you can look up, I'll put some things in the show notes for folks about Zoo Animal Thing, Katy Bowman's concept of casting that we've talked about in prior podcasts. But the casting thing is similar to the Zoo Animal Thing. And I think I heard Erwin LeCourre, that's what I like to say. It seems French. Maybe I'm doing it wrong instead of LeCour. I think Erwin LeCourre.
We're probably saying it wrong.
Yeah. He's just shaking his head. But I think I heard him in a podcast recently saying that it was in a book, like Zoo Animal was in a book or the title of a book, maybe from the 70s or something. I don't know, 60s, 70s, 80s. I'd have to look it up, but I can try to find that and put a link to it. But so we got all these things that cause dysfunctions, even though what we might think is normal and what we've adjusted to from
right.
seeing every day is not optimal, healthy human movement. And so
right.
thankfully people like Katy and Erwan and others, I don't have time to mention them all, so I don't mean to neglect them, but there's a lot of great people out there. But they've done some work to really help us out and see how things should be. And so therefore
right.
we need to be like restored, like the car.
Yes.
You got to get
right.
your car and bring it in for a checkup, for alignment. And so the restorative exercise would help get you back to being what your human potential allows you to be, and like kind of fully realizing that. Right?
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if it's confidence or stubbornness, but I don't love when people tell me that it's impossible to do something. And this idea that, maybe our standards of optimal health are much lower than they have to be really struck a nice chord in me that, going off of that Zoo Animal thing, if you have a monkey in captivity, you might say, oh, a monkey can only swing and cross this many vines in a minute. But in wild, it's 2 times that amount, Yeah. And that's really what their optimal standard really is. And I like that idea that maybe we have way more potential than many people believe we do.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it confidence, not stubborn.
Okay. And so in the restorative exercise program, is it both practical and theoretical or what? Yes,
I would definitely say a big mix of both. I think as I've gone through Katy's work and as it's developed, she's become really tuned into things being very practical. I remember in we had to go to do a week-long training session out in Washington where she lives, and there was a bit of a session where she asked us to not ask any questions while she was teaching this hour-long, because we're all people studying it. So we have all these questions like, well, what about this? And what about that? How does this work? And she said, I just want you to feel it. She said so many times we get bogged down in the theory. We read about it forever, but we don't actually live it.
Yeah.
So I think her new thing on her podcast the last year had been interviewing people who are really actively doing the movement that she talks about. So people that are getting these movements done in their real lives. And it's definitely nice to have both. I've had a lot of injuries I've created through my movement. I started yoga and I loved it. I felt super strong and it made me feel great. And I loved the meditation. It helped to kind of slow me down. But at the same time, I was not opposed to doing hundreds of chaturangas, like the push-up movement, and doing all these crazy back bends and all these things that I thought were beautiful and wonderful, and they still can be, but I didn't understand how much they were causing so much injury to my body.
Wow, too bad. Yeah.
And so that's why I discovered Katy's work a little bit before I started teaching and becoming a yoga instructor. But it wasn't until a few years after when I was really, I love to rock climb too. So, I was finding that I would get stuck trying to build strength places because I have a lot of laxity in my joints caused by the way I've moved my body throughout my life. And so her work has really helped me to fine tune what I know, and that along with my massage therapy, learning that anatomy, we talk about the practical movements, but knowing the theory and the actual anatomy has been really beneficial to my own health, because I've been a person who I spent my youth doing athletic endeavors, and so I was taught to just push through everything. I think if from a younger age we're taught more healthy movements, people don't necessarily need to go through all this training because your body won't need to be fixed. It will be healthy from the beginning. And that's kind of what I would like to do also when I work with kids, is just encourage these healthful, fun, nice movements rather than it being this strict form of exercise that they have to do and that they hate. Like those push-up tests and the sit-up tests and the sit and reach tests that people did in school and the running the mile. Not that having some sort of physical challenge every year wouldn't be good, but I think that there are many ways to make it more fun. Like just do a Ninja Warrior course for the kids. And it doesn't even have to be that complex, but most people know what Ninja Warrior is. But, just do some sort of obstacle course, put out a 2x4. When I babysit, if the kids come to my house, sometimes they'll come to my house, or if I go to theirs, sometimes I bring my 2x4s.
Cool.
I set them up and they'll set things up and they just love it. You see these like 3-year-olds carrying these 10-foot long 2x4s, and people are all concerned, and they're actually learning spatial awareness because they're picking it up. They don't want to hit into the wall or into their friend, and then they're learning to balance. But like I played a hot lava game where we were rescuing the turtle. So we put the turtle at the end of the obstacle course, and we tried to rescue the turtle and then carry it back on our backs. And they don't think of it as exercise or movement. It was just playing a game.
Yeah, it's important. Like you say, moving around indoors. Some people might not think or get how important that is and how much it really develops in kids. Because there's a lot of kids nowadays have problems with body awareness, moving through the environment, 3-dimensional stuff, and this is one way they should be learning it. Right. Picking up a 2x4, and under your observation, you can be there in case they're not thinking. Right. To make sure they don't turn around and smack someone else. You got to observe.
Yes, I'm not sitting there with a 6-month-old on the ground, letting a 3-year-old, move the 2x4 around. Safety is definitely crucial.
Yeah, and then you can think of things like, instead of just letting it pick them up and say, "Be careful," say, "What do you got to do when you pick it up?" Start to teach them like that. If you pick up a 2x4, what if you turn and hit someone? Can we prevent that? Or what if you pick it up and hit something and fall over? Start to get them to actually think for themselves to get more environmental awareness. And that's an important skill that'll help them a lot in life. Then it's helping them to start to develop independent thought, critical thinking, in a way they can on their own at their age. It's something that, as we've talked about in prior podcasts, that we really have a desperate need for today. Even though some people might think that, we've got highly trained scientists and all that. When you look into the data and look at the facts, there's a lot of scientists and engineers who cannot engage in critical thinking. And we've talked about it in a prior podcast with Scott Harris, so people can look that up. But the obstacle course is a good thing. I like that idea, like indoor obstacle courses, because people wonder, how are we going to get exercise? How can we ever do anything? And 2x4s cost like $2, Right. Why am I on the floor?
I use yoga blocks. They pop them underneath. And honestly, this girl who was doing it at the specific store I'm talking about, she was 4 at the time. she set up the yoga blocks in a way I had never even thought to do it before.
Cool.
That made it way more challenging. And, I really encourage this movement, but it did even make me a little nervous. So I stood near her because I thought, oh my gosh, what, she's going to fall off. But I just had to sort of hold back, be near her, because she was maybe a foot off the ground. And I know that she knows how to fall. She's good at that. But, even myself as someone who encourages all this movement, there are times where I have to stop my instinct to want to say no to something. Even though I've strived for the last 5 or 6 years to really start evaluating. I used to say no to kids all the time because I was told no a lot. Mm-hmm. And then I worked with a kid. He would always ask me why. And I know he didn't mean it to be obnoxious. I know we often think that kids say why and it drives everybody crazy, but they're just really curious. And so advice that I've taken from my brother, because everyone in my family loves kids, is he has these kids that he works with say, when someone asks them to do something, that you'll say, okay, may I ask why? And then you sort of create this space by saying, I'm going to do what you say, but am I allowed to know the reason? I do think that a lot of people would still shut them down, but I think more people be likely to give them that space to say, oh, wow, okay, so they're going to do what I say. They're not complaining. They're just kind of curious, like, well, why does it matter if my legs are up at the dinner table? Or what's the importance of holding the fork like this? And then you really start to kind of reevaluate a lot of our social standards about why we do things. So especially with this kid, I really started to catch myself when I would just want to blurt out no. And I really stopped from ever saying that because I said so.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that'd be good.
I don't think anybody likes to hear that, child or adult.
And it's a good opportunity for adults to, instead of just saying no and shut up and I don't want to think, it'd be a good idea for them to, when the kids are asking why and when they're doing their obstacle courses and stuff, it's a good opportunity for adults to think too, engage in some critical thinking, some creativity, think about, I wonder why. I mean, it would, instead of saying no, what would it take sometimes, or instead of saying shut up, or quit being a pain, what would it take just to say instead, that's a good question. I wonder why. And then maybe say, you want to go and think about it and come back and tell me what you think?
My catchphrase often was, why not? Let's see what happens. That was kind of my big thing, And then the kid would make jokes. Oh, well, what if we put a fork in the toaster? Why not? It's like, well, we have bounds there. But that was for an older child. I wouldn't say that to a 2 or 3-year-old for sure.
Yeah. Well, and it's good. It encourages problem solving. I mean, and to do it together is kind of a bit of a bond you have. Right. I do it a lot with students. I teach piano. And a few instruments. And, there's always this, they ask, why do I have to play it like this? Why do I have to use that fingering? Or why do I have to count? Or why, all these whys. But it's a good opportunity to sort of say, well, let's figure that out, and why, if we don't, what happens? If we do, look what, do we get a better result?
And people need to realize the value of that. Some people might think, well, you're not teaching my child this particular song. It's a waste. But you're teaching them to appreciate music at a deeper level, and you're teaching them creative thinking and critical thinking, which, as we talked about in the prior podcast, there is a big need for in this culture. We need more people working on the critical thinking. It comes up at Rice University. If you haven't listened to the podcast yet, it comes up at the great John Hopkins. It comes up in the book Range. And that's just a few places. I know it from my own experience. Scott Harris knows it from his experience. There's a big need for more creative thinking and for people to really understand science nowadays. I don't care if someone is a PhD in science. They're still talking about them people. Even Arturo Casadevall at John Hopkins, famous person, PhD. He's got this, I looked on his website and I had to keep scrolling down to look at all the list of his awards and accomplishments and stuff. So if someone wants authority and prestige, he said it too. But if we go out and just think for ourselves, more people need help with writing, critical thinking, logic. And so this is one way that it'll help. Some of this will help the kids, this kind of teaching Melanie's doing. And we need to give more props and appreciation to her and people like it.
And definitely giving kids more room to make mistakes and for it to be okay for them to make mistakes in a safe environment. You know, you learn the best when you mess up because you go, oh, true. Well, that had a bad result. I'm not going to do that again. You know, if you're constantly not allowed to try something but told it's bad for you, or not going to have a good outcome, it can be very hard. Or maybe the kid wants to then try it even more, but they could have learned the skill 5 years ago. Like one of the things we taught at the Oregon school that I worked at, the summer camp, is we even taught the 4 and 5-year-olds how to light matches. Right. And for a lot of people, that's a really crazy, crazy skill. But I like to think that we were instilling in these children a healthy fear and respect for fire, because they understood that, if it touched your fingers a little, I would call him Freddie the Flame. If he licked your fingers, it hurt. It wasn't a nice lick, when I had all these crazy stories about Freddie the Flame, and he's always hungry. When he's a teeny tiny baby, he needs teeny tiny sticks. That's and then funny. As he gets bigger, he needs bigger sticks. But when he gets really big, he wants to eat everything, and so just understanding the safety and understanding what can happen, and these kids really rose to the occasion. Not everyone wanted to light a match, but eventually a lot of them got closer, and they definitely were able to understand it. I think sometimes we don't realize how much kids can understand and learn. Like, we also taught them how to shoot bow and arrows with a real pointy tip on the end, and they were phenomenally behaved. We had very clear rules. If anybody doesn't follow these, you will not be allowed to shoot. Like, I want you to touch and see how sharp this is. And they were great, most of the time, most of the kids. But if anything sort of anywhere near the line happens, you just remove anybody from that situation. Mm-hmm. But then we gave the kids bow and arrows with noodles on the end, pool noodles, and they're going crazy. They're shooting each other. And the funny thing is, I think kids got more hurt from that than when we had the sharp ones. And they were very clear, like, you shoot at the arrow at the target away from you. There's a line, only a few of you at a time, because they understand it. It's like when an emergency situation happens, children understand. They can feel the tension, and they can understand. They can feel what's happening within the adult and just sense that. Yeah. And I think we don't give them room for that a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's a nice story. That's funny how they were more careful when it was real than otherwise, and more people got hurt.
Yes, it was, I would say, frustrating sometimes.
Oh, and that reminds me. That's like, I think studies have been done on bicycle helmets like that, too. Sometimes you should ride a bicycle helmet, but wear a bicycle helmet, not ride one. Don't ride bicycle helmets, wear them. Okay, but in some studies, when people don't have a helmet on, they're actually safer, because when the helmet's on, then cars will get a little closer. When you don't have a helmet, they give you a little more space. People take more risks of greater danger when they have a helmet on. They're a little more careless. So without a helmet, then people tend to be more careful.
I actually spent 45 minutes on a hike talking about this with somebody. Huh. And by talking, I mean 2 of the people were arguing the whole time. But I think the arguments were that, yes, the biker might be safe with the helmet on, or less safe with the helmet on, but what about the driver in a car? And that was sort of where people couldn't distinguish or get over the argument. But I see what you're talking about, that there seemed to be more room for error with the helmet off, so they just go faster and do more safer.
Yeah. Right. Safer, more dangerous, something like that.
I can't keep those words straight right now. Sorry.
It's all right. It's late.
You all know what I mean, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and in regard to one thing you were saying, I want to throw out, it's like when we're talking about theory and practice, how you need both. One term people have for that, when some people are reading too much and not doing enough, you probably heard it, Sabrina. Maybe you too, Melanie. Yeah, I think I've told it to you. Maybe you knew it on your own, but people will say it's analysis or paralysis by analysis.
Oh yeah.
Because and it means you're analyzing so much and you have to think everything through, and then you're like paralyzed and you can't move, you know? You're taking no effective real life action.
Yes.
But
because information can be overwhelming.
Yeah. But you got to put it in practice.
Not to mention all the
what?
All the atrophy.
Yeah.
From just sitting and analyzing all the time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Real paralysis.
There's another paralysis, yeah.
And then, that practice and feel thing's important. I think that comes up in some of Mark Rashid's work. He writes about horse riding, working with horses. Got some really good books, and that's something that people might look into if they read about Mark Rashid's books and Joe Camp's books about horses. It's good to look at that, and then you can see how to do that better, and then bring the principles back into working with yourself or working with other people or with children. People who try to ride and are only in their head, they're very bad riders. You need to go get some theory and think about things and have some instruction, but you gotta feel it. And if you don't, the horse knows it. If you ain't with the horse, if you ain't feeling it, just like kids know stuff like that really well, the horse will know it. The horse doesn't care about your theory. The horse just knows about the feeling and the practice. Are you with them? Are you both out for the same thing to survive? Are you there for the horse?
Right.
Or
kids definitely know when you're not sincere.
Yeah. And then working with horses would help kind of get into some of this too. Instead of like dogs, because horses are so big, you can't push them around.
Right.
As long as it's with someone respectable who's in like some kind of natural horsemanship school. A lot of different people out there that do similar stuff, but Mark Rashid stuff, Joe Camp stuff, some other people. Otherwise, you got some people who might beat horses. Then you're back to the days of like some priest or nun like banging you on the hand with a ruler when you do something wrong. Bam! You didn't do it right.
Good old days.
Yeah.
Yep.
School teachers in general.
Although at that point in time, kids definitely were allowed more freedom of movement for many of their hours of the day.
Yeah, much better.
But then they had to sit through things like that. So.
Yeah, unfortunate. Yeah. So let me think. I was curious too about. So in the restorative exercise thing, it was both theory and practice. Are there some you got some examples of some movements you do or ideas you learned?
For the theory or theoretical part, practical part, or just sort of all of the above? For
restorative exercise, what are some practical exercises or things y'all did?
So some of the things that I found really informative and helpful were going on walks where we really thought about how we were walking. So we don't really think about there being different types of walking, but people walk differently when they're happy, when they're sad, when they're mad. And so just understanding that there isn't just one gait that we use all the time. And so we took a walk and, we had to carry something in one arm and then we had to carry something in both arms, or maybe over our shoulder, or, just vary it. You could put it behind your back and then just sort of see that the different ways that your body has to adjust and adapt based on what you're carrying. And then, okay, what if you're walking uphill or you're walking down snow? How do these things change? So just sort of that idea, because most people are able to walk at least in some shape or form. So that's sort of a basic everyday movement. But one thing that I teach quite a lot in my yoga classes is I have people roll their feet out. I especially in my yoga classes, like with a super ball, I have them place it underneath their feet and we sort of get different movements and articulations between the joints. And I like to help educate people on this idea that, our feet, like you said, with casting, have been casted by our shoes. And so there are definitely some people who are older in my classes and they have said that they are afraid to fall. They're afraid that if they fall, they won't get up. And so, we do a lot of work with the feet. We roll them out, and everyone's making all these faces like, oh my gosh, this hurts. This is intense. I say, take it at your own comfort. But, and I said, if you were walking around on more uneven terrain, you'd be getting these adjustments to your feet, because your feet, the bottom of your feet should be moving, not your ankles. Your ankles shouldn't be wobbling back and forth, or your knees to move, right? So if you're moving across, maybe you step on a stone that's angled, your ankle or your knee shouldn't really buckle out to one side. Your foot should be able to adjust a lot of the way, right? And so if your foot's able to adjust and you're walking through your house one day and maybe your kids left the Legos out or some jacks or something, and you step on them, I've hopefully now given you some tools that your foot can maybe deform over that object, and you're not going to trip. You're not just going to go rigid and fall over. You actually have the ability to deform, the bottom of your foot and sort of maintain the upright posture of your body. Yeah. So that can be really helpful. It's an easy thing. You could take a tennis ball to start with. You can do it through socks to begin with. You definitely need shoes off, or if you have really, really light, almost like slippery shoes, you could give that a try if your feet are very sensitive. But that's an easy one to do. You can even do it sitting in a chair to begin with. And then you go out into the real world, and maybe you're in your grass, if you have grass, and you just maybe step over a few stones, or you put some stones there. Mm-hmm. And you work gradually towards doing something. But those are kind of really easy things to just progress into doing.
Or on a 2x4. If you spend a few dollars in a 2x4, step on the side of the 2x4.
And you don't know how many people I have taught classes to on the 2x4 that are really surprised that they can't walk across it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I've had a few people go, I did gymnastics though when I was a kid.
As I've said to people before on the podcast, I know someone who, when he was at a major college in the United States, freshman football team, college football,
right?
He could not walk on something that was a little wider than a 2x4 and flatter on the ground. He couldn't balance on that. But
yes,
on the one hand, it's shocking, but it wasn't a surprise because I knew stuff like that already. But
right,
a lot of people would say, well, I'm tough, or you're a great athlete, so you can do anything. And that's just because of as we talked about earlier, some of the ignorance about what the human potential for movement really is and should be. It's really impoverished and poor in our culture.
Right. One of my favorite games to play when I'm teaching a class is I always like to end with some sort of obstacle course. And one of my favorite ones is to bring awareness of how much we depend upon our momentum to move. So I'll play freeze dance over an obstacle course. And the obstacle course might be in a circle or an oval shape, and I'll have some yoga blocks or some 2x4s and some bolsters, some things you have to step on that are not perfectly what we're used to. And I make people go at a variety of speeds. I make them go fast, and then when I stop the music and they have to stop moving, they nearly fall over every time. And then when I have them walk slowly, they nearly fall over because they're walking slowly. But when I stop the music, they're actually able to pause because they're not throwing themselves forward or kind of falling forward to keep moving. And this is something I've become aware of for myself, because I definitely was not a few years ago. It's how much more work it is to do all of that in a slower fashion. I'm so used to going through things quickly. I can run across the 2x4, but could I do it if I had to go very slowly, or if it were slippery and things like that? Yeah. Just change it, being adaptable. And that's with MoveNet thing, right? Being adaptable.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that from moving slower from MoveNet. I remember some other people. And I try to put that into practice a lot in my movement training. Sometimes I'll go out in the woods and stalk, hunting stalk, STALK, moving really slow through the woods, to try to move at a reasonable speed, not take forever, but to go really slow and not make as much noise. And so I can go 50 yards to the woods or 100 yards, and it can take half an hour or 45 minutes.
Right.
Because you're crawling.
And that brings patience.
Yeah. And then it makes you very mindful of your environment and alert. And so it's just to some extent, I don't have to do some meditation, because I am doing it when I'm doing some of that. It's like
Right.
everything is out of my mind. It's like total awareness of only what I'm doing. I'm just
Right.
in touch and connected with my environment, my body, gravity,
Yes. It's definitely different when you're in a real situation. The other day I was playing with a neighbor's dog, and I just got this puppy, and they both ran out into the road. There was not supposed to be a hole in this fence in the yard, but there was. And I had to climb under the fence and just chase after these dogs. I had been in a swimming pool, so I was in my bathing suit. I was barefoot, running around the road. And, I didn't stop to think like, oh, I'm out of breath. And, oh, there's stones on the ground. I just had to keep going. And afterwards, when I finally got the dogs, I was so out of breath. But it was very different than if I go for maybe a 20-minute run for fun or for training or whatever I call that. I come back and I'm out of breath and I feel good, but there was something really different about that being a really stressful situation that I was afraid the dogs were going to get run over.
Yeah.
But I was actually able to really decompress afterwards. I felt that it was easier to de-stress and just let go of all of that, because what I had been all worked up for was all good and it was all perfect and happy. And the dogs, just to make the story happy end, they had there was a good ending. They made it. I got the dogs. And they're not allowed to be in that fencing area anymore.
Yeah,
but it was
sense.
definitely really different.
And that's something we don't do enough. And as I said earlier, it's like one reason people don't move is because they don't have to. They don't have a purpose for it. That's something people need to do more. It's in MoveNat. And then Daryl Edwards in Primal Play knows fun and purpose is important. Katy Bowman knows it. Do something. She does stuff, moves for a purpose. But people can really learn more and get a broader idea of that concept and more of its biological roots by studying things like the Mark Rashid books. He brings that up. He talks about horses, but the books are just great reads. So I've listened to him multiple times because he talks about this when he got into horses from a kid. And he talks about this old man he knew, and he calls him the old man. But in one book, he talks about the name. I forgot the guy's name right now. But in this, the old man learned from, I forget who it was, from like a Cherokee, I think. And one thing Mark points out in the book is how a lot of people, and this applies not just to horses, but to dogs, cats, people. A lot of people, when they have horses, they don't give them a purpose. They want them to do something out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, when does something move when it doesn't have to? Like no animal ever in history. They move to play. They move to get away. They move to explore their environment. It's always for a purpose. And so when you bring that in and give the horse a purpose, then it's going to respond and going to work better for you. And it's like the same thing with the kids.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of movements that we end up not necessarily purposefully limiting, but even at the infant stage, these movements and reflexes that these children have, which are, certain parts of the body are touched or pushed, and it stimulates a response from the nervous system that's not voluntary. These movements will ultimately turn into voluntary movements. So if your child is strapped into something all the time or put in this sort of vertical, like one of those bouncy jumper things before they've really developed a lot of that strength, we're limiting the ability of their body's natural, I guess rhythms is maybe the good way to put it, or learning sequences, right? Because they have all of these movements programmed into them. They just need the time and the stimulation to really develop them. And so just, there's that whole concept of free range kids, right? Just sort of letting your kids have the ability to do what you're saying, which is move to play and have fun. And as infants, we don't think about it, but they're moving to learn and just to develop.
Yeah, and Melanie, maybe that's something we need to ask Janet Oliver, what she thinks about the bouncy chairs and stuff and how it affects kids.
I used one.
I was putting bouncers for sure.
They didn't have them in my day.
But to be honest, the kids really liked it. Like when they knew they were going in it, they were like, and it was like just a bit of time to do dishes or, grab the laundry and not worry that they're going to be.
Yeah. That's what my mom said too. She said, you just loved that bouncy thing, but you do know now it's not super great for hips. And when babies are little, they're only born with They're not born with the same curvature of the spine that we develop, and it takes a lot of floor time, a lot of being held in someone's arm to build up the muscles, because the way that our spine is shaped, the shape actually comes from your muscles being in a certain tension and a certain alignment with each other. Like with all of our bones, like we can rotate an arm in because we have so much tension one way, and then you have your arm turned in a way that's not the way it's more ideal to be, I guess.
So are you saying that some of that natural development that's healthy will be interrupted or even completely gotten rid of if you introduce something too soon that the child would
right do? Like I read a study on diapers, and this is a hard one to swallow because I don't, what do you do without diapers? But they took these children and they put them in, they had one group of children that was wearing no clothing, no diaper, another group of kids that was wearing a regular diaper, and then the third group had the cloth diapers, that are really thick. And the kids that didn't have any diapers on hardly tripped. The turnout of their feet was much less, so it was more their feet were facing straight forward. The kids who had the regular diapers on, it was like each one got a little slightly wider, and they walked, their gait pattern became different because the babies wearing the big thick diapers had to learn to walk with that bulky mass between them. So of course here you have parents who are trying to put better things on their children's body by using diapers and maybe being better for the environment, but little do they know that it's actually it's messing up the development of their gait pattern.
Wow.
And I've actually seen this with a few little infants who have these giant diapers on. You can see they can barely move their legs. Like their hip mobility is very limited. And I do a lot of work with these primitive reflexes. I've been to these really awesome conferences that work on a lot of stimulation of these nerves, which are, closer to the surface of the body. But it just really, what it showed to me is that physical contact, holding your child, light massage, things like that can just go such a long way. And it's something that we don't necessarily think of doing in this culture, but I took this wonderful course in college called parenting, and we learned all about the ways that people parent in different countries. And a lot of countries in Africa, every day the child is given a massage multiple times because they believe, at least in the few countries that were in this study, they believe that, how will a child learn to move and work these muscles if they haven't been stimulated? And someone in the class was like, what? Give a baby a massage? That's just so bizarre. You can't do that. That's wrong. It becomes almost like a taboo thing. But massage is really movement. I don't think we think about it that way, but you're actually pushing the muscle and you're making it move, and blood and oxygen are really getting moved through there. So
that's interesting. Yeah.
It's an easy thing to do when you're hanging out with your baby. That's my one tip. Just a little bit of massage.
It would feel natural because you want to touch your baby, and the baby loves when you hold them. And you hold them in a way that it's funny. I haven't thought about that with the massage part. But when you hold a baby, your fingers are always kind of, you don't just go like this and just,
I've seen that
natural.
Yes.
What'd you say?
I have seen people hold babies nice and stiff like that, but just definitely when you're used to holding a child, there's a lot of kind of caressing and movement that you're required to move when you're holding a kid because they're moving and you have to move to adapt to that, and vice versa.
For some parents that are new, they don't know, like you'll read in one spot that the sling that you put across is really great. And then then others will say, oh, but that maybe makes the child thinks that it has to be with you in order to be out and about, instead of like setting them and then just, push. Have you come across much thought on that, or any on that?
It doesn't work for every parent, but I was always taught as a kid, if a baby cries, you pick it up. That was my parents' philosophy. And like I said, everyone in my family loves kids, so we've always been I think I was held quite a bit as a child. And I don't think that has made me really super attached to my parents, and I couldn't let go. I don't think there's anything wrong with a baby seeking your comfort. I mean, it's part of our DNA to need to be near people, because if you're not, you're prey. Something can come and get you.
Especially a baby,
So they expect, infants, it's just they expect to be around people.
Yeah.
And so I think I guess the big thing with parenting, and I don't have kids, but I've watched a lot of people's kids, and I've definitely people feel judged all the time with parenting, you know, and I get this, oh, I feel so guilty that I'm leaving my child with you. And I try to express it's really good for kids to have many people that they care about and they love deeply. I think it's really great if kids have their parents and a couple of maybe babysitters or grandparents, you know, people that they truly, truly care about.
Yeah, they need that security too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think baby slings are great. It depends on what you're going for. You know, there are those ones that dangle the legs down that are less than ideal for the baby's movement. You can also carry the baby, but that does get very, very tiring. But I don't think there's anything wrong with having a baby near you or near somebody for all the time, really. I know you need a break, and I get it, because even babysitting for 10 or 12 hours a day or nannying is it's a lot. And I've watched kids for a week before or longer, but ideally you have a community, and that's just, it takes a village, I feel like, is a phrase for a reason, because it's unrealistic and unfair to ask one parent to really be the primary caregiver. It's a lot to watch a kid, and as much as I love them, it can be really hard to watch a baby who's a couple of weeks old or a month old that you feel like doesn't really do very much. Mm-hmm. You love them to pieces, but I was excited when a 5-year-old would come home from school because I didn't talk to anybody all day until he came home. You know, I just think so. If you're around other people, other young families, or even, you know, the children's grandparents, it's just really nice for them to have that and for you to have that. You know, I know that people identify as, you know, liking to be in isolation and then liking to be around introverts and extroverts. But I definitely feel that people are really meant to be surrounded by other people most of the time. It just might be hard if we're not used to it, or if it feels overwhelming because of anxiety. But definitely, I'm pro having the baby close to you when possible.
The crying part you mentioned, that was something I struggled with, because my firstborn had reflux and he cried straight for 6 weeks.
Right.
Maybe 2 months, I guess, till we got him on some medication. But I read everything I could read on, do I let him just cry?
Right.
Figure it out. No baby does that. Or do you, when they say something's wrong, which is why a baby cries, they need something.
They're not crying for no reason.
That's right. They're not doing it to manipulate you. And I have read books that said that, you know, this child is going to use that as a way of getting you to do what they, you know what I mean? And it's like, they're a baby, you know? So anyway, very interesting. But the one that worked the best was really give them attention. Don't act like they don't matter. Their pain is, you know, completely unwarranted, or whatever they're feeling. Maybe lonely, and they just have to touch base with you. Give them that.
And even movement.
Much more secure. Yeah.
We don't think about giving babies movement, but even from day one, they need to be moved.
Yeah.
In this same parenting class, I really loved this class. We were taught, you know, most Americans, they took a survey, when a baby starts to cry, you think about feeding them or changing their diaper. And this, I think it was a Caribbean island that they studied, the first thing they said was, oh, well, the baby needs movement. And we do that naturally. We rock the baby up and down. We do that little baby bounce, which is movement. But they think, no, let me move the arms. Let me go for a walk, hold the baby, get it to move around, because babies can get bored. You know, they're unstimulated and uninterested, and that movement can be important. But having a baby be sick too is just, I do a lot with holistic nutrition. And so there's just so many factors. And when the baby's crying, you can't think about all those factors.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to do what happens. But
and you got to think about it beforehand.
Diet and things like that can be really impactful.
And I'll link in the show notes some stuff, some people that folks can trust about babies. It'd be Katy Bowman and Chris Kresser, and then Janet Oliver would have some good stuff.
In terms of the crying too, there's a difference between a 3-year-old throwing a fit and a 6-week-old, or even a 2-year-old, and allowing them to express their feelings through tears for a little bit of time, because they have comprehension of really what's happening, and whatever their communication skills are. Part of the reason they're probably crying is because of a lack of communication, or a lack of someone misunderstood somebody else. And just, I'm okay if a 3-year-old cries, but I still will, even at the 3-year-old level, I still usually pick the child up though and comfort them, even if it's a tantrum. And I found that to be really productive. I'm saying I'm there for you, and I'll even say to the child, you know, I'm so sorry you feel this way, or I'm sorry, but we can't do this, you know, and it just acknowledge that their feelings are valid, but nothing is going to change.
And, you know, as the kids got older, and yes, you're right about the fit thing. You see that in a store or, you know, wherever, you know,
Right.
park or whatever. But I read, like I said, I read a lot about the crying and what can you do to kind of alleviate, because we really wanted to have children that were feeling safe. But
Right.
if they needed to cry, we knew something is wrong.
Right.
So we went with sign language. We started with that when they
Yeah.
were very little.
I love that.
babies. And they could tell us what it is, that as much as they could, you know,
Right.
we were limited, of course, but it was such an eye opener to consider there's a language here, because they weren't able to enunciate yet.
Right.
But physically they understood what, you know,
Yes.
water and, you know, and milk and, you know, and so book, you know, all these things that they couldn't say or maybe take us to show. So I encourage parents to even just consider trying something that seems a little unorthodox, you know, but read a lot, because that's where I got some of the best things
Yeah.
about raising the kids. And, you know, they also say that there'll be less tantrums,
Right.
less out, you know, kind of this whole, that's how I get attention now kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, a lot less. So,
Yeah, I'm a big fan of using sign language to your advantage. It's definitely
Yeah.
helpful, or even, you know, you can create your own kind of sign language and just make the communication clear with the kids that this is what you're saying, and maybe use multiple words, use an easier one, and different sound effects, things like that they'll pick up on.
but kids that know they're being heard are a lot less likely to have to cry and scream and throw a fit to
Right.
get what they want, because they know if they say to you, I'm really this, or I really want, or however they would show it, they
Yes.
know that the parent is listening to them. They don't
Right.
need to go to that extreme to get
Right.
some attention.
Yes.
And
I've definitely
sometimes
go
it's
ahead.
probably not so much something they want, but they just want attention.
Right.
It
Yeah,
might be, I
hope
want
they
this,
deserve
but
it.
really they want interaction with you, you know?
Yeah, and don't they deserve that? I mean,
Yeah.
Right.
you are their sole place that they go for safety and nourishment and entertainment and
Right.
fun. Yeah, I mean, obviously that. So it's a great, yeah.
I've
Some
definitely had the advantage of watching multiple families and developing how I work with kids over the years, to this family who, you know, I started listening to Katy Bowman stuff at the same, you know, so these were the kids that I changed a lot with.
Mhm.
And this child, by the time she was 3, she would very rarely throw fits with me. And I really do believe that so much of that was I was always there for her. I
Mhm.
couldn't always be there necessarily in the exact way she wanted me to. I couldn't give her everything she wanted, but I was always there for a hug or to be held.
Yeah.
And there were times when I couldn't hold her. I can't really hold her while I'm cooking dinner.
Yeah.
Or I can pick her up for a second and say, oh, can you help me? Like, look at this. Did you notice the chicken changed colors while we're cooking it? Okay, let me put you down for a second. And then she wants to be held again. Okay, but can you just help me with this? And all of a sudden she's interested in cooking, and she knows how chicken changes color, and it goes from kind of this pink clear color to this white color. And we've just hit multiple birds with, you know, one stone.
Yeah. So many things. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, and also if you are showing the child that they matter, that when they're concerned, it's important to you as well. When
Right.
you literally can't do something for a little while, they know you're
Yes.
not, that's not the norm. That's
Right.
the exception. And kids start understanding in a sort of abstract way that mom isn't 24/7 every single second. And it really does make a healthier bond and relationship.
Yes.
So those times where it starts getting a little more distant, it
Yeah.
feels natural. Like, yes, everybody
Yeah.
understood this was going to be.
And that gets easier as they get older. I haven't found working with kids that if you are very attached to them in terms of holding them and being near them, I don't think that necessarily means that they're super attached to you and don't want to branch out. I actually find the opposite, that if you show a child a lot of love, that they feel more confident, and though they want to be by your side, they're also okay with running off and playing with other kids and going off and doing these things, because you've helped instill confidence that, yeah, you can do this. And, oh, you're, you know, definitely you can go play in the playground because I've been there when you were younger, and I know that you can climb this, and you feel good about that as the child, and you're ready to go run off into the world, but you still want to come back and hug your loved one.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I know we have to stop soon. Gosh, that's.
Yeah.
Oh, Yes.
But and then one more thing I was going to mention about that. A parent sometimes, like if they drop them off at daycare or at school, they'll try to sneak away so that they don't have to deal. And that is a number of places I've read, and I've never been able to do that to my kids, because a child will very much feel like they need to cling to you because they know if they turn, you're gone, and they didn't get to sort of have that moment where it was okay to let go. And it's just a respectful way to say goodbye to your child and say, I will come back. And if they cry, okay, but at least they have a healthy sort of understanding of that mom will say goodbye to me and not just on.
And there's someone on the other end comforting them and telling them it's okay, mom, dad, whoever will come back.
But sneaking away is a very, it might seem easy for the parent because they got to leave before the, or the upsetness, but it's not.
Yes. And there's a fine line between sneaking away and staying there for too long. So for parents who have a babysitter come, this is just advice from me as someone who's babysat for a while. Don't say goodbye for 20 minutes, especially when your kid has separation issues. Yeah. It's so hard, and it makes it much harder for the kid and the caregiver. Yeah. Say your goodbyes. You don't have to sneak off. You can say goodbye, and the child will usually cry for 1, maybe 10 minutes. Yeah. Depending. I've had a few stubborn kids that I have known them for years, and this one girl cried for maybe 35 minutes, and I was lost for why. But that has happened one time. But I definitely say your goodbyes, say I love you, have a good night. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be sad, and it's okay to tell children it's okay to be sad. Yeah. But and this is what is happening.
Yeah, it's totally validating for their feelings and a much better way. Well,
and they have a lot to learn. Hold on one second. They have a lot to learn. Like I think it was in How to Talk So Children Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk, or How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. But by Maslish, I think. But I think it was in there. I read the idea that a good way to think about kids is you got to think about them as aliens from another planet. They know nothing about our customs. They're thrust into this world against their will. They're here with all this stuff they don't understand. They don't understand yet the concept of bye or how people leave and come back. Yeah. And there's long-term union. It's stuff they have to learn. So you want to help them learn that and realize, tell them, maybe do little practice sessions like, okay, I'm going to, at the grocery store, okay, I'm going to go over here, Junior, and you're going to stay with your dad, and then we're going to meet up again in 5 minutes.
Right.
Okay, now I'm going to hold you, and your dad's going to go away for 5 minutes to get something, and then he's going to be back. And then you build up, and then you go to school. But if we think of the progressions, what does the kid going to need as an adult? That comes from what they have learned when they're 16 or 18, which builds on 14, which builds on 8, which builds on 2 and 3. So it's really good to think about what's going to happen in the future, what they're going to need, and try to develop some of those. It'd be great if someone wrote a book with some little flowcharts. It'd be graphics and easy for people to get.
And working with what the kids already know. Yeah. Right? Like, these kids are meeting my puppy for the first time, and the puppy loves kids, but she jumps up on them. And, she's at their face level, so her paws, getting their face is not ideal. But the way I explain it to really young kids is that, she's a small puppy. She's like a little kid. She just hasn't learned she's a kid who hasn't learned what manners are, or how to do nice things for other people. And then explaining how teeth come out and how, when little babies get teeth, they like to chew on things. It's the same thing with a puppy, so showing them or teaching them something by using knowledge that they already know. You have to know what the kid already knows at that point. Yeah. But just by teaching by that way I found to be really helpful. It doesn't have to be a perfect metaphor, but it helps them to sort of get those gears turning and to really start to understand that.
Yeah. Know your audience and know their context and work with that.
Yes. And generally 3 to 5 year olds and certain age groups have a general standard of what they're being taught, which makes it easy to go, how when colors mix and, the kids are taught things like that, blue and green or blue and yellow make green, things like that you can, there are small assumptions you can make. And then if they don't know it, you'll have to work back from there. But
cool. Yes. Yeah. And then one thing to tie in back with something else we were saying, talking about progressing, when you were, it was good you said you were working with the one girl and she had built some stuff up and you were worried she'd fall, but it was only a foot up and she knew how to fall. And that's the thing people need to do. Everyone's going to fall. Teach your kid how to fall, how to roll.
Right.
Like MoveNat does that. It's so great. They got this thing called the break fall, or they have all these progressions that a lot of other movement systems don't. And I know, like, Melanie, hadn't that happened to you where you've fallen and were able to catch yourself because of the MoveNat stuff I've taught you, right?
Yeah, I went into a squat. I was falling on the ice in our driveway, and I just went down into a squat rather than like trying to stay up and fall and really get hurt or whatever.
Yes.
So I was like, I got to tell Michael because it was something that he had worked on. We, got so.
Yeah.
The great thing too about kids is that you can definitely teach them this stuff, and especially if they're older, they might need to be taught. But really young kids will just do this naturally, especially if they're seeing other people do it.
Yeah.
But say you have a 1, 2, 3-year-old, they will naturally come into these perfect rolls.
Yeah, squats.
You know, but don't teach your kid a somersault.
Yeah.
Because that movement is slightly pointless in the real world, unless you're doing, say, a flip. But a somersault where you roll straight over the spine,
and you
kind of tuck the head, is only really useful on a gymnastics mat where you aren't going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Is that because another roll, like when you're falling, you kind of roll more across the side of your back, and you're going from, say, your right shoulder to your left hip, and you're making that diagonal line so that you are getting all of that momentum and all of that force is being dispersed across that line rather than straight down your spine and crunching your neck down. So just another piece of advice.
Yeah.
Teach a parkour roll or a ninja roll or whatever you want to call it, a MoveNat roll. I worked at a parkour gym and we used to call it a ninja roll. But focus on that versus a somersault. People are always so proud to show me, oh, my kid can do a somersault. Like, that's yoga, right? And I think it's great that people want to educate their kids on movement. But a nice roll, a side roll, going to set your kid for life.
Yeah, true. But cool. So that was a great conversation. We're going to end here, even though we could keep going, because we value health, and Sabrina is like an hour later than we are since we're in different time zones. And so we want her to get some sleep and get to bed soon. So, any last words, Sabrina?
Well, thank you so much for having me on here.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure to talk, and I hope that people got to hear something interesting.
Yeah, hope we can do a part 2. We got more to talk about.
Definitely. I feel like we hardly scratched the surface.
Yeah, true. Any last words, Melanie?
No, thanks so much, Sabrina. Appreciate it.
Cool. So I hope you enjoyed it, folks. Some good information there about movement and its relationship to thinking and child development and adult movement and happiness and development, and good ideas in there about what we can do for children and students to make them better movers and more confident. And that confidence is very important in facing life, the challenges of life. So it's that holistic thing again. You got these dynamic effects. You got this non-linear system where you got some effect from out of left field you didn't know would affect something else actually does. So all this stuff works together. So the better we get movement at an early age, get it all dialed in and going well, species appropriate, then the better off our children and students will be. So if you have any questions, just shoot us a message or something, and listen to some other podcasts and do some of your own research, because make sure you're thinking for yourself, because if you don't think for yourself, then you can't apply it properly in your own life and to your kids. If you're just trying to ride a horse, following a certain routine you memorized, you ain't going to be a good horse rider. And same thing here. We really got to understand this stuff on our own to be able to put it into practice and really do the best for our children and students. So cool. All right. So thank y'all folks again, and hope you enjoyed, and we will talk to y'all soon.